Hey, welcome back. Today's special Shoe and Show episode is a series we're running called Behind the Design, a masterclass with Wilson W. Smith III, powered by Jones and Vining. This series goes beyond the finished product to explore what really does make great footwear: fit, comfort, and of course, performance, and the creative thinking that brings it all together. And that's exactly where Jones and Vining comes in. You know, for decades, they've partnered with the world's leading footwear brands. I mean, all of them, collaborating from product brief to design to production, ensuring perfect fit, comfort, and performance at the highest level. Across this masterclass, we're going to check in with Wilson about his iconic design career as a designer for both Nike and Jordan, the many different athletes that he's designed for that we all know and love, his strong faith in God, and what the future of design is for our industry. So with that being said, let's dive into the conversation. All right, Wilson, thank you again for coming and hanging out with me to talk about your storied career. It's just an honor to just pick your brain and hear these anecdotes about what has made you the masterclass designer that you are. And so today, we're going to be talking about all the relationships and all the designs that you did for athletes off the basketball court. We spent the first episode talking about MJ and all that went happen with that. He had some great stories to tell. I'm still thinking about them. But let's pivot to other athletes. If you were to pick one kind of iconic athlete where you had a really strong relationship in another sport, who would that be as we set out on this conversation?
Oh, that's great, Matt. You know, honestly, it's a little hard to pick one, to tell the truth. But if certainly I'd say the most maybe iconic would probably be Serena Williams. I'd say she's probably the other most significant. And in some ways, you know, Michael Jordan represented an era, maybe, and Serena represented another era. But I also had, you know, relationship with a lot of different tennis athletes, including Andre Agassi, and I could talk about or Derek Jeter. There's a lot that we could talk about. Baseball, running, different athletes. But definitely when it comes to Serena was great. Is great because I think in some ways the culture, everything has been evolving. It's almost like the difference between say Michael Jordan and LeBron or something. There's a different culture that's going on. The NBA is different. You know, the game is different.
Very much so.
So the game's very different. So the era is different between say Michael Jordan and Serena Williams, and the fact that we have a woman who is you know the inspiration and the GOAT in her sport, and arguably, you know, among the greatest athletes ever. And
Yep.
it was really fun because the great thing about when we signed Serena back in 2003 and my journey, I felt I was so fortunate because not only did I get you know, invited into the Jordan brand at its inception and got to be the first designer in the Jordan brand. And so I was in the Jordan brand for 6 years. All of a sudden, at the end of it was interesting. I had aspirations to be a creative director, a design director, more my personal journey. And these were aspirations. And that wasn't happening in Jordan. It was fine. You know, they had me more dedicated on product creation, on product design, which was great. And but I wanted to try my head out of leadership a little bit more on design direction. Well, but that wasn't what was necessarily seen to happen. But I was a senior designer in the Jordan brand, and then tennis came to me around 2003 and said, hey, we'd like for you to come be a senior designer in tennis again. And I had been in Jordan for 6 years, and I thought, well, you know, I really like tennis. You know, so a lot you got to kind of pay attention to your gut. And I was saying, as much as I've loved this Jordan journey and it's going great, you know, and you know, tennis came knocking again, and I thought, well, this is interesting. So I decided to make the move and be a senior designer in tennis. And I remember even at the time, Mr. Jordan was like, you know, are you sure you want to do that? because the Jordan brand was doing great. And I said, well, yeah, you know, I think I'm kind of wanting to look back into this tennis thing. I contrary to my own belief in my head, I wasn't that, London and Paris and New York and Melbourne, those places maybe outshine a
nice
sweaty
spot.
gym. Nice spot, more than a sweaty gym in Indiana. So, but that wasn't necessarily the motivation. But there are some fun things about tennis. So, but anyway, so I was thinking, okay, great. So there's an opportunity to. So I'm gonna go back to tennis. Well, so I go back over to tennis, and about 2 months into my being there, the guy who was the design director at tennis, he quit and he went to somewhere else. And then they came to me and said, "Hey, will you be our design director?" I'm like, "Oh, great. This is what I wanted to do anyway. I've been wanting to be a design director." So it's like, "Oh, great." And then about a month after that, we signed Serena. And so it was just like boom, boom, boom. And I was like, wow.
Ask and you shall receive, my friend.
Oh, brother, I was so blessed. I was like, wow, Lord, this is kind of really, really cool. And the great thing about her at the time, I remember we had, leadership, strong female leadership at Nike as well. And they were basically pushing for us to, that here was an opportunity to tell a story more about a female athlete, which was really exciting. And not only that, what was interesting, the equation that was different for me was being Serena is not only a female athlete, but she's a female athlete in the world of tennis. And so tennis is, at least at Nike, is really big as a global sport and really big in Europe at the time. And so almost bigger than America. So a lot of what Europe had to say really mattered almost more than what, say, the US had to say. So I had to really pay attention to a different set of circumstances. And then I had to pay attention to a female athlete, which is great. The other thing was that the Serena piece was an opportunity, actually more like an apparel story. So it was really, so that was different. So I was coming, before I was footwear guy, hey, footwear takes the lead and the shoe, and then, the apparel gets to kind of be the French fries to the Big Mac, Well, that's not the way this was working. This was you were now, an accessory for the apparel. And so I was like, wow. And then top it all off, Serena herself is a designer. And so I felt like I had to come alongside a lot of things. I was not, and it was different in, female, Europe, apparel, the athlete as a designer, there was all these different things. But it was a great journey. It was really fun. What I needed to do was just really pay attention, pay attention to the evolving circumstances, how the company was starting to embrace things that were, back in 2003, we're kind of expanding our, we had started sportswear and we'd started to kind of expand even outside of the story of just performance on court. And so that was a big deal. So then it was very interesting with Serena. And I at the time I went to Mark Parker, who was our, basically our CEO at the time, or at least certainly the Nike president at the time. And I went to him, I said, well, Mark, if you were designing for Serena, and Mark has a design background, and Mark used to be my boss, and so I knew him pretty well. But I said, if you were designing for Serena, what would you do differently? And he said, well, Mark can think outside the box really well. And Mark goes, well, I would let her sense of style and fashion, I'd let that lead the performance. I would not try to design something that performs and then expect her to come on board with whatever it is you come up with. And I thought,
right,
wow, that's different, because I've never felt that fashion was something we would even, pay attention to. I mean, we were more like, we set fashion. We don't follow fashion, but we don't allow fashion to influence. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll let fashion take the lead. I'll pay attention to Serena. And so we had about 10 months to design for her. I know the story may take a second, but this was the first.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay, this was the first time that I had worked on a project for her. And so so I remember meeting with her and really getting to know a little bit about what she was all about. It was really great. And so just paying attention. So the first 2 or 3 times we were around each other, and we had about 10 months out before the Open, because I met her in October. We were about 11 months before, late August, or that we needed to get the Open together for 2004. And so I was basically, every time I was around her, she was, because it was winter months, I think, she was always wearing boots. And I remember, I thought, okay, she's wearing boots. She's kind of, and I'm just paying attention, but not really thinking much about it. But I remember one time, and this is interesting. I think that sometimes your greatest ideas happen right before you wake up or something. You're just kind of laying there, kind of thinking. Even the name Nike came to a guy, to Jeff Johnson right before he was kind of laying on the bed, and they just kind of realized that he wrote the Nike letters on the side of the bed. That's a whole nother story I could get into, but
right.
But regardless, so I was laying there, and I thought, wow, what about a tennis boot? Kind of came to my mind. I thought, whoa, a tennis boot. And then I kind of woke up and I rolled over and I had a piece of paper and pen right by the bed. I started drawing. I drew this boot.
Really. You haven't even brushed your teeth yet, and you're drawing a boot for Serena Williams.
Boot, and that's the only shoe I've ever drawn in bed, which was really weird. But I did have a paper sitting by the bed. But I remember, and so then it just felt like a thing. Like this is. I think this is it. This is the fashion thing that Mark Parker was kind of saying. So I drew this. Well, we get to go see Serena eventually, and when I go to, part of my team, we kind of drew it up better and created all kinds of stuff around this boot. And I showed it to her, and she was like, oh, she just loved the concept. She signed off on it, so it was all really great. And so then I was like, okay, well, since we let the fashion lead, now I need to go to the innovation, and I need to ask the innovation team, now, what would you think about a boot?
And so it's like reverse of what it normally is, the process.
Exactly. It reversed the process. So I went to the Nike Innovation, and they said, well, if you treat it more like a sleeve, like a compression sleeve, because we've been learning a lot about compression, what it does in terms of circulation, perhaps in the calf muscle, it could prevent from cramping. And so there's a lot of good things about it. Certainly, if you wear it for a bit, it will help to warm up the calf muscles. So it's like, oh, okay, so here's a benefit to it. It's not just a fashion statement. And like Mark Parker said, let fashion lead the innovation. So that was a fun thing. So anyway, so we created, and at the time I had just recently, in 2001, we had released the Air Jordan 16, and I had worked for 16. The 16 has a stirrup underneath it with magnets, and it was kind of had a spat on the top. And so it was basically, Michael was in between playing for the Bulls and the Wizards. And so we were saying he was transitioning from the basketball court to the boardroom. And so till he had this spat that was covering the laces like that. So Serena's shoe was similarly constructed in that it had a stirrup underneath, and then it had a sleeve all the way up, and the sleeve zipped off. And so it was, and that was something that was that I was working with Nike Innovation and creating just where, the ideal place for breathability, the ideal place for support, really kind of a educated sleeve that
right.
spoke to the gastric and soleus muscles in the calf and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so we designed this boot. Well, then the fun thing was Serena herself, she wanted to be rebel with a cause, and she had all these kind of images that she wanted coming out of the U.S. Open. And, she wanted a jean skirt, like kind of like Andre Agassi had jean shorts.
I remember. I think I had a pair. Yeah, denim tennis shorts.
Exactly. Exactly. So
that's quintessential 90s, by the way, like early 90s, like denim shorts you're playing tennis in.
Exactly, but they were really great stretch fabric. But anyway, so Serena had these denim shorts. A denim skirt, which was really cool, and then these boots, and with her whole outfit. But she had studs and black, all kinds of stuff on. So anyway, she comes walking out of the U.S. Open, and it's like she's on a Paris runway, and cameras are flashing. It was a night match. I was so pumped, so I get to be there. And but the U.S. Open people, I remember the marketing guy told me at the time, he says, hey, they weren't too excited about these boots. They didn't want her to wear them the whole time. And I said, oh, well, we just want her to warm up in them, and then she can zip them off. And, that was, so it was more so she warms up in them, she zips them off, she goes out and plays her opponent, crushed opponent. It was a great, great night. So everything's very good. Well, that evening, I flipped on Sports Center, which was really starting to happen about then. And one of the first images was, the boots. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then the next day, USA Today, you're at a hotel and you pull it off the door. And I look at the USA Today in the upper left-hand corner, there's like a close-up of the boots. And I'm like, I lost my mind. I'm jumping around the hotel room. And the great thing is almost every image, every picture that was taken during that tournament, they were all taken during the warm-ups because she didn't wear the boots during the match. But because Serena is an influencer and she pushes beyond even the game itself. And Nike was starting to expand into sportswear, expand into influencers, and eventually people like Travis Scott and other singers or whatever who are influencing the culture begin to influence the more the sport culture side of the product. So the storytelling. So Serena was kind of that person who really helped to kind of bring together both sport and culture. And she's a designer and she's a person who's in both of those worlds. Okay, so I could keep going, but.
Hey, pardon the interruption, but I just want to remind you that this special series Behind the Design is powered by our friends at Jones & Vining. They're a trusted partner to footwear brands for materials, engineering, and innovation. You can learn more at jonesandvining.com. That is jonesandvining.com. Yeah, well, I want to ask a question. And there are a couple other anecdotes about Serena I think we should get to. But before we do, this flip of the script, right? This movement from fashion leading design rather than and performance rather than performance leading the fashion, those kinds of things. Did that change the way you approached it in subsequent relationships with athletes, or was that just a Serena thing? Like, how much of this translated to other athletes?
That's interesting, Matt. I think it does translate on maybe a what would I say? Not as active, but more of a passive level, because I believe that all athletes have become more and more curators of their brand and who they are, and storytellers, and guys like Devin Booker, and I mean they will. That's another guy who I've worked with a lot more recently. But they have a world that they've curated, and that's part of their storytelling, who they are, and they have a social media presence. And so I think that yes, that matters big time. But with Serena, it was a lot more active, intentional story statement, style, fashion, expression that I think was a little more of what her opportunity and kind of like what she was representing.
Yeah. And fast forward to today, and there's a beautiful, pretty new, gigantic building on Nike's campus named after her. And in the lobby of that building on display, I believe, are those boots, along with many of the other things she's worn to celebrate her iconic performance as an athlete and a fashion influencer. So that's from 2003 Wilson to 2025. There's a whole building dedicated to her on the campus now, which is really cool.
She is so inspiring. The fun thing about that building, that's actually the largest building in the state of Oregon in terms of square footage, which is kind of wild. And it would be a 60+ story building if it was, say, in downtown Portland or whatever. It's kind of amazing. But she's pretty iconic and inspirational. Yeah, the funny thing I think of was sitting on the floor in front of her, kind of zipping on and off boots or trying to get the fit right, because she would be, she's physically, your calf and everything changes a lot dimensionally depending on how you're just what's going on. And so we need to try to get this right so that it's not something that's a hindrance. And I remember I'd be down there on the floor just kind of looking at him, and she's like, she would say to me, I always want to call you Owen. And I would go, okay. And she goes, well, Owen Wilson. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. You call me Owen, call me anything you want to. So, so she's really funny. And throughout time, ever since then, she will I've seen her sign things to me and say, thanks, Owen. And then she got, and then she'll put Wilson in parentheses or whatever. But so she's been a fun person to work with.
Well, and let me ask you this, because I know the story in our last conversation, we talked about the moment you're going in to pitch Michael, right? And kind of what that feels like. There was a different kind of experience when you flew down to meet with her and her family, I think in Florida, and some of the guidance you got as you headed into that room, and then what you wanted to make sure you did to make sure he liked you and was able to call you Owen for all these years. So talk to us about that.
Oh man, you're hilarious, man. You see, this is what happened when we're friends. You get some of these stories that I'm editing, but to tell, yeah. So the fun, you just got to pay attention. And we were flying down, and I was sitting next to the sports marketing agent at the time, and she says to me, she says, "Hey, one thing, the plane was getting ready to land. I remember we were about landing, and she says, hey, by the way, Serena has this puppy, and if her puppy likes you, Serena warms up to you. But a lot of times, if the puppy doesn't warm up to you, neither does Serena." That's what she said to me. I was like, going, really? But I thought, okay,
the stakes are high.
Yeah, stakes are high. And so sure enough, the really fun thing, there were some photos taken at the event, but one of the photos that I love is the puppy's head is in my lap and I'm petting the puppy and I'm going, I know what's going on in my head at that moment. It's way back in the subconscious, but I'm responding to what the sports marketing agent said to me about Serena, and whether or not that would have been the case, but I certainly, you try to do all you can in those settings to connect with the athlete and to do.
What I love about that, and it plays right into that point, Wilson. I almost called you Owen, but Wilson. What I love about that photo, and maybe we can show it as we're talking, but you envision these kind of interactions in like a corporate boardroom with slide decks and samples. You guys are hanging out on like a couch, like your family.
Right.
It's a really endearing photo. You're literally sitting on a couch with her and you're petting a dog. It's like you're watching the TV as a family in the den or something. And that's what's really struck me when I saw that photo for the first time. You showed it on Capitol Hill. Was that you're right. It's like families building a relationship. It's going into their living rooms and hanging out with them and getting to know them. And that came across in that picture.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's cool, Matt. It is relationship. I think that lately, if anything's happened in our culture with the advent of social media and everything and even with the hindrance of COVID, is that we've learned how to kind of be in living rooms with people. We've got the backdrop hasn't been so corporate always or whatever. And so it's been more relational. And so that's also been part of the case. It's great to be able to connect with these athletes and to really feel like you're in their world. I have to give a shout out though. I tell you, Serena is an interesting person. She I always would think she was even had powers beyond. She has a presence, an amazing presence. And I remember one time. I mean, honestly, one time I was in this is what you just said reminded me. I was in her place in LA and I was presenting something to her, and I didn't think she was kind of that excited about it. And so it was she was kind of, you kind of see her response kind of changing, and demeanor kind of changing. And the amazing thing was, as her demeanor was changing, outside these clouds started rolling in, and then all of a sudden, then it started raining, and I was going, does she have powers that I have no idea? Because it was really bizarre, but maybe it was just coincidence, but it was like the weather changed even as she kind of.
That is interesting.
It was, but it was just, and I don't know if one was affecting the other or if she was affecting the weather. But right. But I was thinking, I was wondering what was going on.
That is so interesting. I would have done anything I could to make her laugh or smile, and then the clouds would part and the sun.
Yeah, right. Get on
you
with
get back to petting your dog. I mean, it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all
Where's
good.
the dog?
Where's the dog?
The dog?
Well, Wilson, I can't thank you enough for, again, spending time with me and just unpacking some of these iconic stories. These are stories that those of us who are fans of sneaker culture, who are fans of you. I mean, I will share, we were out to dinner one night in DC and you had a multitude of people come up to you who you inspired based on the shoes that you designed. So your creative spirit and your passion for it is infectious. So thank you for joining us for this second edition in this series on Wilson W. Smith III, the Masterclass designer. So I really appreciate you coming on and hanging out with me, Wilson.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's beyond an honor for me. That's all I could do. I wish I could just talk to each person who's checking this out and say, you got this. I want to encourage people. So thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us on the special Shoe and Show episode of Behind the Design, a masterclass with Wilson W. Smith III, all powered by Jones & Vining. Throughout this series, we're pulling back the curtain of what it really takes to create great footwear. From creative storytelling to fundamentals of fit, comfort, and performance, and Jones & Vining plays a vital role in that journey. They work behind the scenes to help tons of different brands deliver footwear that looks great, feels right, and performs where it matters most. To learn more about Jones & Vining and how they support footwear innovation from concept to consumer, visit jonesandvining.com. That's jonesandvining.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.